Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. He served as an impeachment manager for the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump in the United States Senate. Temadayo Aganga-Williams, former federal prosecutor who served as a senior investigative counsel for the January 6th committee. Also with us, Faith Gay, former federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of New York. And Congressman Lieu, I want to get your reaction as an attorney and as someone who has, in effect, prosecuted Donald Trump in a Senate trial about what Jack Smith is saying about what he is doing outside of the courtroom, the comments he is making outside of the courtroom, and how they appear intended to affect and influence the jury pool.
Thank you, Lawrence, for your question. And let me first say Happy New Year to those who are celebrating Rosh Hashanah. In regards to your question, I believe people have the right to free speech, and Donald Trump can talk about that he's innocent or whatever he wants to talk about, but he cannot intimidate witnesses. He cannot try to taint the jury pool. He cannot engage in conduct that's going to affect potential witnesses or disparage the judge and try to affect jurors. And so I think this is a very limited order that the prosecutors are asking for, and we'll see what the judge does, but I think it is appropriate under the circumstances.
So, Faith, we've all been watching this and listening to these extrajudicial statements, as they're called, by Donald Trump, both in speeches and in social media postings for weeks, and wondering, when is the judge going to do something about this? When is Jack Smith going to do something about it? It turns out Jack Smith did something about it weeks ago in making this filing, which was under seal. We're not sure exactly how long ago he did it, but it turns out they saw provocation enough weeks ago.
Exactly. So, listen, this is all about basic fairness. If any of us were accused of a crime, the one thing we would care about in this country is our right to fair trial. As indicated, there's no way in the world that Donald Trump is being asked to shut up about his innocence, that he's being precluded from putting on evidence, from showing up at his own trial if he chooses to do so. All that's happening here is the attempt to try and level the playing field. And that means don't scare the witnesses, don't scare the parties, don't scare the potential jurors. If you're going to do jury research, do it fairly. Don't go out and spread lies. So again, at the end of the day, once again, the idea is for Mr. Trump not to pervert an American institution and something we care about, just like our right to vote. We care about having a fair trial, no matter who's involved, the former president or any one of us.
Temadayo, it seems that Donald Trump, it may be possible that Donald Trump wanted a motion like this so that he could claim they're trying to shut me up, they're trying to prevent me from campaigning for president.
Lawrence, I think that's very possible. I think he's been barreling towards a confrontation with Judge Chutkan. But I think one thing I want to focus on is what she's always said from the beginning, that in her courtroom, that there is Mr. Trump, not President Trump. And I think that's what this is about. Defendant Trump has different rights and limitations. By virtue of being a defendant, he doesn't have unlimited First Amendment rights. He's going to be able to campaign. He's going to be able to talk about this case generally. But what he can't do is follow the same pattern that we saw in our investigation on the January 6th committee. As we know with, for example, Cassidy Hutchinson, former President Trump and his allies are willing to try to intimidate witnesses, to influence testimony, and to push people away from the truth. And Judge Chutkan, I think, will not let that happen here in this criminal case.
Congressman Lieu, Donald Trump has responded to this already, this motion being made public, posting online saying Biden prosecutor deranged Jack Smith has asked the court to limit the 45th president and leading Republican nominee. He then goes on to say, I'm not allowed to comment. They won't allow me to speak. And of course, he's lying about that. Jack Smith says specifically, of course, you can talk about the case in as much as claiming that you're innocent. but you cannot get in here and specifically lie about the judge, insult the judge, lie about the prosecutors, and all of these other lies that Donald Trump tells on a regular basis.
Donald Trump continues to lie. And the problem is not just that Donald Trump makes statements. He makes statements that then causes violence. January 6th happened because of Donald Trump's statements and his conduct and what he was telling people to do. There are a number of January 6th defendants who said that they showed up at the Capitol because they believe Donald Trump told them to do so. And what Jackson is pointing to is not just statements that intimidate the judge or jurors or potential witnesses, but Donald Trump knows when he says these things, his supporters might then act on it. And that's a further level of intimidation that most defendants don't have that ability to do.
Faith, Jack Smith, at a certain point in the motion, says that the court should enter a proposed orders imposing certain narrow restrictions on public statements regarding this case. And they specify, they're talking about witnesses, don't talk about witnesses, do not talk about the prosecutors, do not talk about the judge, essentially. It seems as the most minimal restriction you could possibly expect in a case like this.
I think that's right. Very careful to carve around First Amendment rights. Very careful, again, to aim at a level playing field. And the one thing that doesn't get mentioned is that Jack Smith says this doesn't just apply to Mr. Trump, Citizen Trump. It also applies to the government, which here is representing all the people, not just the people who voted for President Biden. The government will abide by the same rules. Jack Smith says, give us an order that applies to every party. Nobody is contacting jurors. Nobody's doing juror research. Nobody is disparaging potential witnesses. Nobody is harassing potential jurors. Nobody. The government with all its power on the prosecution side, as well as Mr. Trump with his bully pulpit.
And in the motion, Temedeo, Jack Smith makes a note about one of the lead Trump defense lawyer in this case, Attorney Lieu, who went out and did a whole gang of TV shows, would not come on this one despite being invited on, where he spoke extensively about the case. He said things that were strange, to put it mildly. The judge didn't like that. And Lieu has since gone absolutely silent. And Jack Smith makes the point, this is an example of how the judge's authority can be used in this case to get Donald Trump to also go silent on these crazy lies that he's telling about the prosecutor and the judge.
Lawrence, I think that's right. I think a limiter order here is very likely to get President Trump to act in line. And we'll also remember that Judge Chutkan has another potential card up her sleeve. As she said early on, one of the reasons why this trial may move quicker is because of issues like this. If former President Trump is not able to abide by the conditions of his pretrial release, which is what he's on right now, he's on pretrial release, then she said that trial that she scheduled will happen perhaps even faster. And I think if we see more infractions going forward, I could see Judge Chutkan revisiting that trial date and saying this case has to get tried before the jury is impacted, before witnesses are intimidated, before victims are harassed.
All right, we just got some video of Donald Trump talking about this evening. We're going to squeeze in a commercial break right here. We'll be back with all of our guests and that video right after this break. We have video of Donald Trump tonight talking about Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's motion for a gag order on Donald Trump to stop him from lying about the judge and the prosecutors and the potential jury pool in the criminal case against him in Washington, D.C. Let's take a look at what Donald Trump had to say about that tonight.
Did you see today that deranged Jack Smith? He's the prosecutor. He's a deranged person. Wants to take away my rights under the First Amendment, wants to take away my right of speaking freely and openly. Never forget, our enemies want to stop us because we are the only ones that can stop them.
Congressman Lieu, Donald Trump, taken at his word, seems to be incapable of comprehending the clear English that Jack Smith has used in the way he wants to restrict Donald Trump's language?
Under the First Amendment, you can say whatever you want, but when you're dealing with a court case, you cannot intimidate witnesses or try to intimidate judicial personnel. So let's say Donald Trump said, hey, to the jury, if you convict me, I'm going to send the Proud Boys after you. Well, he doesn't actually have a First Amendment right to say that, because that would be trying to intimidate prospective jurors. So Donald Trump has to understand that under the First Amendment, as a defendant, there are certain things that he is simply not allowed to say.
Faith, one of the portions of the pleading, of Jack Smith's pleading in the middle of it, was an example of jurors in Washington, D.C. in one of the January 6th trials who were intimidated and afraid of the defendant in that case. And they were very concerned that that defendant might be able to get access to information about their names, addresses, where they lived. They provided that to the judge as an example of the kind of fear that presumably could be much more intense in a trial of Donald Trump.
Exactly so. And this may be leading us to another aspect of the criminal case, which is an anonymous jury pool, or at least an attempt to protect certain aspects of the jurors' identities. So I think Mr. Smith is trying his best to go ahead and establish a case for why there could be intimidation and why extra steps will be necessary before the pool is chosen. Keep in mind, part of this motion is saying any kind of jury research or conduct, even if sanctioned by the court, must end 30 days before trial. So again, what's happening is trying to tighten and make sure that the zone of fairness around these potential jurors is strictly preserved. That's all that's trying to happen here.
Timoteo, the judge does have a serious concern here to weigh, which is this is a presidential candidate and a leading presidential candidate, the dominant presidential candidate of one party. No judge has ever had to face the question of in any way limiting the speech of a major presidential candidate like this.
I think that's right, Lawrence. These are very important issues of first impression that Judge Chutkan is considering. But she's an experienced judge. She's good at what she does, and she's going to be able to draw that balance. And I think that's what Jack Smith has tried to do, is give the judge already a pre-drawn balance here. Not saying this is a full gag order that former President Trump can't speak at all, but that there has to be restrictions. And here, I think it's important to put the onus on former President Trump. It's his actions that are requiring some curtailing here, right? It's his choice to speak in this manner. He could go out there and, as Jack Smith says, professes his innocence. He's allowed to do that. He could go out there and campaign and talk about issues. He's allowed to do that. He can talk generally about the case. But that's not what the former president's doing. He's speaking in this violent, hyperbolic language that we've come used to, and that's going to be dangerous. It was dangerous after the election. It was dangerous how it impacted the 6th and led, I think, at least contributed to the attack on the Capitol. And if it keeps going here, it's going to be dangerous for the witnesses and potentially the jurors as well.
Ted Lieu, it was really striking in Jack Smith's motion how he linked what Donald Trump was doing leading up to and on January 6th with what he's now doing in this case to the jury pool, presumably to the judge, to the prosecutors. Jack Smith said he's actually doing the same thing that he was trying to do on January 6th. This is just the courtroom version.
I thought that was a brilliant point that Jack Smith made. And I also want you to understand that this is not just Donald Trump saying things. It is an entire ecosystem. You have Republican Mike Huckabee saying that if Donald Trump doesn't win at the ballot box, then the next election is going to be decided by bullets. There is a strain of violence within the MAGA wing of the Republican Party that is very threatening. It has caused violence. It could cause additional violence. And we have to have jurors who are not intimidated by that. And you've got the former president of the United States saying very violent things in his post-violent rhetoric. And I think it's appropriate for a judge to say, you just can't say certain things because you're a defendant in a criminal trial.
Congressman Ted Lieu, Timoteo Aganga Williams, and Faith Gay, thank you all very much for starting off our discussion tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you.